I assumed that the art world was a sort of sophisticated, gentleman's club where people played by certain rules of civility. I think that what I've learned is that it's anything but that.
Jamie, great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Your doc really cracked open this case. So, talk to me about the fallout.
It was quite unusual. The doc was finished in 2019, and in spring of 2023, the OPP held a joint press conference with Thunder Bay Police in Aurelia, where they announced that an investigation, a 2.5 year investigation inspired by the doc, had resulted in 8 people being arrested, 40 charges being laid, and over 1,000 fake paintings seized.
I know some of these cases are still ongoing. At least one is in the sentencing phase, I believe. Is the Morrisseau affair resolved then? Like, are there more fakes out there, Jamie?
At the time we did the film in 2019, the estimate was that there were 3,000 fakes out there. At the time that the police announced the results of their investigation, they were estimating 6,000 fakes. And I believe it's gone upward from there.
Jamie, what does this do to Morrisseau's legacy?
For an artist of his stature, he is Canada's greatest Indigenous artist, certainly one of our greatest artists, period, and one of the very few who invented his own school of painting. For someone with that pedigree, his work ought to be worth a lot more. And one of the reasons the prices have been kept down is because there has been, long before this documentary came out, it was sort of an open secret, you might say, that there were a bunch of fake Morrisseaus flooding the market. So this, while in a way it raises awareness about fakes, and you could say it increases skepticism in potential buyers, in the short term, in the long term, it's a necessary first step to establishing what the real work is, and then theoretically that could rise to the market value it really deserves to have.
Right, if we can get all those fakes off the market and people can actually trust what they're buying. What does the
Right.
story then, Jamie, reveal to you about how vulnerable the art world is really to scams?
I was completely naive about this beforehand, I must say. I assumed that the art world was a sort of sophisticated, gentleman's club where people played by certain rules of civility. I think that what I've learned is that it's anything but that. When you take into consideration widespread fraud in pretty well every major gallery in the world, when you consider the spoils of World War II looting that also litters galleries, major galleries and institutions throughout the world. It's a bit of a cesspool.
I mean, you paint a real picture there by saying that word. Jamie, is art forgery just a financial scam, or in your mind, is it also a form of misinformation?
Oh, it is. The title of my film is an ironic poke at misinformation. Art fraud is, of course, based on misinformation, and is a crime in that regard too, because it tampers with various ideas of what the truth is. It plays a notion of legal truth against a more objective truth. This is what the fraudsters were thriving from for decades, was this specific kind of misinformation. The onus in an art fraud case is not on the person who owns the art to prove that it's real. It's on the person making the accusation of fraudulence to prove that it's fake. So the whole issue of truth, it leaves, from a legal point of view, this leaves the notion, the whole field wide open to misinformation,
Hmm.
and people have exploited that shamelessly.
Who is the biggest victim here in your mind? Is it the collectors or the artists?
I mean, I will just say there's another part to the story of a bunch of crimes of abuse against Indigenous youth that were going on in and around the production of these fakes. So I would say, above all, above financial fraud, above cultural fraud and abuse, there was the physical abuse of a vulnerable group of youths, that they are the prime victims connected with this crime, in my mind. I think unwitting collectors are victims. Obviously, collectors who are aware that they're trading in fakes are criminals, or by association at the very least. The artist, of course, is also a victim. I felt that this was actually a real live case of colonialism that I happened upon in this story, in that there were a bunch of crooks, most of whom were white, who were benefiting from this kind of cultural defiling of the work of one of our greatest Indigenous artists, and surely that is a cultural crime too. So I think there are many victims.
If someone out there has never ever bought a piece of fine art, why should they care about this story and this topic, Jamie?
I think what's significant about this topic, even to the art neophyte, is it's about a widespread crime. So that's always fun to hear about. It's always interesting to learn about. You assume you live in a world of law and order and right and wrong, and even having been a journalist and filmmaker for a long time now, I'm still kind of shocked to discover the chicanery that goes on, and the kind of second guessing of all sorts of aspects of society that is really constantly necessary to guard against misinformation of all kinds. And I think that the story of this fascinating, albeit dark and disturbing, and also kind of funny at times, story, because it's full of crazy characters in and around this art fraud, is a great reminder that you always have to, second guess everything in life.
Yes, many layers, many characters. I enjoyed it very much. Jamie, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Well, Jamie's documentary was one of our TVO originals. You can find the full story on our TVO Docs YouTube page.